The national strategy to deal with the coronavirus has been flawed from the beginning, in no small part because it doesn't exist. And there is no national strategy. And why isn't there? Because originally it sounded like there was going to be, and the government made the wise decision of putting their best sort of man in charge in March and early April. Jared Kushner, noted relative of Trump, a senior White House advisor, led a task force parallel to the White House's official efforts to devise a plan to accelerate coronavirus testing and supply chains nationwide. Ultimately, that was abandoned, and President Donald Trump shifted much of the responsibility for controlling outbreaks to individual states. The idea was going to be that in addition to all the stuff the coronavirus task force was doing, is he's going to figure out the whole supply chain thing, make sure that we have enough tests so that we can expedite both the growth of tests, but also getting the results back quickly. That never happened, which is why many people still have to wait 1 to 2 weeks to get their results, which becomes sort of a philosophical thing. It's like, do I have it? Let me wait long enough that I'll either fight it off or be on a ventilator by the time I get my test result back for many people. Now, why did that happen? Why did they set it aside? We do not know for sure, but there is an amazing report by Vanity Fair talking to one of the individuals involved in that effort, saying that a sentiment one expert said a member of Kushner's team expressed was that because the virus had hit blue states hardest, which was at that time true, a national plan was unnecessary and would not make sense politically. Quote, the political folks believe that because it was going to be relegated to Democratic states, that they could blame those governors, and that would be an effective political strategy. Not an effective public health strategy.
No.
What?
Fauci's the one who's politicizing this. Fauci's the one who's using political, because you've heard of political science. Science is in political science. His, as scientist, political. It is that which is politicizing this, not Kushner and company, who allegedly just told you that they were going to politicize it. And if you close your eyes and get in touch with your feelings, you know it to be true.
And by the way, totally true. So let's say, okay, the theory being put across by this person who was involved in it by Vanity Fair is they thought about doing something about it, then realized, it's only going to hit blue states. You know what? Let's not deal with it, and then we'll just blame them. Okay, so that is an incendiary possibility, and we can't know for sure, but let's look at two parts of that and see, with what has developed over the past few months, is it true? So, did they set aside the strategy? They did. It didn't actually bear any fruit. So the first part, in terms of them setting aside, is true. Now, that doesn't necessarily get to the motivations, but the second point is, did they turn to just blaming governors and, in some cases, mayors? Yeah, they totally did that. He still does that. I mean, he's sort of pivoted to blaming them for chaos in Portland or whatever, but he is still blaming the blue state governors. Despite the fact that most of the states hard to hit now are red, he's still blaming Democratic governors. So it kind of bears out.
This actually seems kinder to me than what other things that it is. I feel like it's proven that they've done. Which if it was just this that would be bad enough. But in other situations, they actively got in the way of Democratic governors and legislators, so that they could hand political wins to other people. I know in Colorado, there was a situation where if left to their own devices, the state would have acquired something like 500 or like 800 ventilators or something. But because the Trump administration wanted to deliver a win to specific legislators and political figures within that state, they put the stop on the original ask and then supplied a smaller number in a way that they could say, at least the Republicans gave you this, and as a result, the Republicans are looking out for you. And that is across the board. That's what I've been saying for a very long time, that they do not want to beat coronavirus. They just want to beat Democrats.
Yeah.
And that's a huge mistake. And that has borne out today as the Republicans just kind of tuck tail and go out on their August recess, because they just don't want to actually help people. They just feel like they're in a secure enough place to secure a political victory.
Yeah.
And they don't want to actually deliver aid to human beings.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. We're going to have more on that later on. But yeah, this appears to have been the case. You know, the Vanity Fair article goes on to say that, quote, it was very clear that Jared was ultimately the decision maker as to what plan was going to come out, and no plan came out. So we can't say for sure that this is why, but this was part of the discussion, and they didn't have a plan, nothing came of it, and they have been blaming the governor, so it ain't crazy to think that might be why. And by the way, in terms of politicizing this whole thing, we also know that this is as of Monday, reports emerge that Trump's pivot, for instance, to wearing a mask in public, sort of wanting to pretend that he takes this more seriously, you know, before he started tweeting out stuff about demon semen and everything, may have been motivated by advisors showing him increases in cases in Republican and swing states. So it seemed like when it was hitting blue states, that affected them to not take it seriously. And now that it's hitting red states, it's affecting them to sort of pretend that they're taking it more seriously. It's been political from the very beginning.
Absolutely. And you would hope that they'd be smart enough to look more than 5 minutes into the future. That's the problem. And every step of the way, the Republican side has been saying things that are like Dory from Finding Nemo. They're just, they only exist in this 14-second window. I mean, when there was a spike in infections, they were like, well, at least there's not a spike in deaths. It's like, well, wait 2 weeks, morons. There's going to be a spike in death. And lo and behold, there was. And then looking backwards, they say that the Northeast is actually a place where, in Trump, when he started resuming his coronavirus task force or his coronavirus press conferences, he pointed behind him and said one of his big victories was the Northeast, where things are looking very good. The South is a bit of a problem. The Northeast is all Democrats.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you left to fend for themselves. Those are the people you got in the way of, and they were absolutely able to eventually get around it. And it's your boys in the South that are screwing things up for everybody, and that is killing people.
And why don't we turn now to the most recent numbers? We haven't done this in a couple of days, but according to yesterday's report from the COVID Tracking Project, we have got 70,000 new cases, not the highest we've ever had, but right up near the highest we've ever had in a day. Solid more than 800,000 tests, which is good, and over 1,500 COVID-19 deaths reported in yesterday's report. The 7-day average is now over 1,000 once again. I believe that 1,500 reported in one day is the highest that we've had since the middle of May several months ago. And so that is moving in the wrong direction. The good news that we have, if there can really be good news on a day where 1,500 people died from something that should have been wiped out months ago, is that the 7-day new case average is declining in all 4 of the hardest hit states, Arizona, California, Florida, and Texas, which, if this continues, implies 2 things: that death number should start to go down in 3 or so weeks, and that hopefully renewed media attention and pressure has gotten people to start taking this seriously once again. That when the numbers started to go up a couple of weeks ago, we started talking about it on a daily basis, telling people they got to take it more seriously. Hopefully that is happening.
And runner-up for Garbage Person of the Week for me was Laura Ingraham, who posted the Texas image that, you know, Texas shut down. And after they shut down, they started seeing a reduction in cases. And Laura Ingraham is like, this is a huge win for Republicans, and the shutdown Democrats better watch out. It's like, listen, if you just listen to the people who did the work, your work would be done for you, as opposed, and this is. And a pandemic is actually, and I'm going to say perfect in a way that seems like I think it's a good thing, but I'm saying perfect in that it is the absolute like foil for how Republicans act in politics. It's everyone else you can outflank except science.
Yeah, except the virus.
You can outflank Democrats because like Democrats are probably playing some kind of game. You can outflank your opponent in some kind of political debate, but you can't. The only way you can outflank science is by listening to it, and that's the one thing they refuse to do.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.